my name is Rhiannon and welcome to my channel, Blue Dog Board Games. So I have very kindly been given a copy of the new expansion to Zoo Tycoon The Board Game, which is called Zoo Tycoon New Shores by Mark and Samuel at Treecer Games, and I am going to be giving you my final thoughts on this game today. If any of you has seen me before, you will know already that I am a really big fan of Zoo Tycoon The Board Game. I have both a solo playthrough and an in-depth solo review of the base game on my channel. I will link those videos down below if you did want a little bit more information about the base game and if you are unfamiliar with it. But I am a really huge fan of Zoo Tycoon The Board Game, so I was so excited to be given the opportunity to review this expansion, especially as, and I will be absolutely honest here and head up this review with saying that I am typically not somebody who goes for a lot of expansions. I have very minimal expansions in my collection. I just find that my playing style generally is I will play a game for a little bit, have it out on the table, pack it up, and I don't feel the need to explore beyond the base game sometimes. So I was very interested to explore this expansion with that mindset, in that I understood that this expansion was to expand replayability, not necessarily add loads of new mechanics. And that is exactly what I would look for in an expansion if I was interested in one. And so let's go into this review and see what I think of this expansion from that perspective. So in this review, I'm just going to go through the additions that are included in the expansion, what I think about all of those new additions and how it integrates into the game. Of course, this game is being crowdfunded right now, so all of the components that you will see in the overlay and the B-roll, they are going to be pre-production copies or prototype components, so there may be some imperfections or differences that you may see when it comes to comparing it to your final copy. So without further ado, let's get straight into the review. So the first thing I'm going to start with is the brand new Animal Exchange. Zoo Tycoon New Shores includes 24 new main species, completely brand new, as well as 12 new co-species to play with. Some of my absolute favourite new additions include the manatee, the polar bear, penguins and koalas. They are just absolutely gorgeous. So from a gameplay perspective, these play pretty much identically to those in the base game. So there's nothing going to be mechanically different about this. However, it just massively expands the replayability, which is the sole point of this expansion. I have definitely felt personally that playing the base game a lot, I don't necessarily feel that it's overly repetitive, but I definitely find myself going down very similar strategies, tending to start with the same, if not very similar species, and sometimes it can get a little bit stale, just a little bit. So having these brand new species to play with and all the new co-species, this just helps to overhaul the game a little bit, just to make it feel a lot more fresher and enhance that replayability like a huge amount. There are so many new animals here. I definitely feel like this is a really good choice from the designers. A whole new Animal Exchange just means that the whole game feels basically brand new. Same mechanisms, just the whole facelift here. But also, when you're a newer player or a player that doesn't necessarily get it out as much, this just expands your horizons so much more to allow you all of those choices to play with whatever animals are your favorites. So we'll talk about the Animal Exchange a little bit more because it's a little bit more interesting than just having a whole new Animal Exchange. This expansion also allows you the opportunity to have this Animal Exchange as a modular system. The Animal Exchange is actually given to you in a double layered format, and you are given all of the cards of the main species of the base game, so you can slot your main species over any of the species in this brand new Animal Exchange. This means that you can ultimately completely customize your game to include whatever animals you want from the expansion and the main game. There are, however, a few rules that you would need to keep in mind if you are playing in this modular way. So you will need to be aware of like replacing level 1 species for level 1 species, level 2 for level 2, and also keep in mind like the type of animal they are. So if they're a bird, you might want to replace it with a bird, or if they're a solitary like small group species, replace it for a like in that way. And so there are definitely additional things that you're going to need to think about when you are playing with this modular system. It's going to increase the fiddliness of the setup of the game, especially when you are like looking at the animal cards that you're going to be having in your deck. Also, you're going to be needing to be aware of what national park scoring criteria are available to you. There's quite a lot of things that you're going to need to get right if you are playing it in this modular way. So on one hand, this completely blows my mind in terms of the the replayability here and how modular and how integrated this game could be, it is incredible that you could potentially play this with all of these combinations of animals and to have a pretty smooth experience. However, I personally don't think I will be playing with this particular aspect, and I can imagine if people are not really up for like enhancing the fiddliness a little bit more. It's no secret Zoo Tycoon is already a fiddly game. That's not necessarily a negative in my opinion, but this is going to definitely enhance that even further and make it a little bit more difficult to get to the table. It is definitely worth mentioning though that you can mix and match as much as you want to. If you wanted to replace one species, you can absolutely do that. If you wanted to replace 50-60% of them, you could look to do that as well. And so this just offers a way for you to play the game how you would want to. So moving on, I now want to talk about the additions of the new terrain types or new biome types in the game. New Shores expansion includes 3 different new biomes. You've got the water tiles, you've got tundra, and you've got dry forest. You also have the option to have semi-aquatic species in your zoo, so you'll be integrating some water tiles alongside their typical land tiles as well. So once again, we're not going to be focusing on any new mechanics here necessarily. This is just enhancing the replayability even further and also just making this a much more realistic like zoo management game. Zoo Tycoon does a really fabulous job of feeling like a zoo management game, much like its video game counterpart. And so this just further pushes it into more realism, which is really fabulous. I love that. It is worth mentioning though that the water tiles do feel a little bit different because when you're having aquatic species in your zoo, the aquatic species don't necessarily have a running cost per se. So the running cost is going to be associated with how many water tiles these species are occupying. So each water tile has a 1 money running cost, and so they're going to feel a little bit different to play with, but not overly so. And of course, with the addition of the new terrain tiles, you're also going to have new donor cards to like shuffle into your donor deck as well, representative of the new terrain types, and you'll just remove the ones that aren't like representative in your game at the time. I do particularly like the addition of like the water into this expansion. I think that's really nice, and especially the semi-aquatic species. Their popularity is usually linked to how many water tiles that they have access to. So for example, if you have one water tile that they have access to, they'll have a smaller popularity that you will get as a bonus when integrating into your zoo. But if you have the 2 water tiles that they really, really would like, you get an even bigger bonus for your popularity when getting them into your zoo, which I think is really, really nice and really realistic and thematic. I can imagine that visitors are just like enjoying the species even more when they see them swimming around in this bigger area. Love it. So definitely at this point, I really love all of the new additions of the animals and the new terrain types or biome types in this game. Just really pushes that realism of this management game. However, at this point, it's definitely worth mentioning that table space, because Zoo Tycoon is no secret, it is a table hog, and this just pushes it even further. And I'll go into this a little bit more when we look at the Vivarium species, but potentially, if you are mixing and matching with the modular system, you're going to be having up to 6 different terrain tiles in your game. That's potentially like 2 or 3, 4 different like big bags of terrain that you're having to fit somewhere on your table. It's going to be, going everywhere, and there's a lot of stuff. So it's definitely to be aware of. This expansion is going to need more table space than your base game, but I will say that they have done a job of minimizing that to as much as possible. So now I want to talk about the addition of the Vivarium species in the game. Each player is going to be given a Vivarium tile, which is a 3x3 grid that you can fill up with different Vivarium species that you can purchase at the end of the autumn phase. This is the part of the expansion that does add some additional mechanics, but it is a very, very quick phase to go through, and I actually think that it eases the slight difficulty of the game, and especially because I'm almost predominantly a solo player, and I can really sometimes feel that difficulty of pushing up all those different tracks, and it can feel quite punishing. I think that the Vivarium species do a really good job of actually pushing that away and actually giving you the ability to push up those tracks quicker, and it just feels a lot friendlier. So to get the Vivarium species into your zoo at the end of the autumn phase, you will be given the opportunity to purchase up to 2 different species to add into your enclosure. The first one's going to cost 1 coin, and the second one is going to cost 2 coins. And you'll have the ability to add these to your vivarium into your 3 rows, but you do need to consider which ones you select based on their specific benefit and the biome associated with them and their animal category. At the end of the game, you're going to get additional popularity points for every completed row you also have in your vivarium. At the top as well, you also have the addition of reptile eggs. So if and when you are lucky enough to have your reptiles breeding in your zoo, you can donate 3 of these eggs to be exhibited in this vivarium. So I particularly really like this addition to the game. I really enjoy the additional puzzle that this adds to the game, because you are only able to purchase and put a species into your vivarium if it has like a similar attribute to one that's already in that row. So for example, you can only put an animal next to a fish if it's already a fish, or it has the same bonus, or it lives in the same terrain type. So you always need to be checking like which ones are available and which ones have something in common with something else in its row. On top of that, you also need to balance the purchasing of these with your typical building phase, because I find money to be tight in this game, and yet these vivarium species are going to cost between 1 and 2 coins each. So it's just something that you need to be sort of mindful of, and it's just a little bit of an extra puzzle to think about as you're going through the game. I really, really like this edition. It is just small and snappy and just gives you that extra push you might need to get up those tracks in the solo game and in the multiplayer game. As I've already said, it just makes the game feel a little bit easier, a little bit friendlier, and just to help get those extra points, those extra bonuses, which can be the difference between feeling like you're really leaving yourself behind or actually really achieving something. So as you will see in the B-roll, that this is the part of the game that really does add the extra table space. However, the additions of the vivariums are very small, so it is only a very small tile that you're having to find room for, and there is one for every single player. And the tiles you're going to be drawing, I believe it's 2 plus the number of players available. So for a solo game and a 2-player game, you have 4 vivarium species out and about. And so they're only very small tiles, so that's not really too much of a bother there, but they do need to be visible for all players to see. Just something to bear in mind though, because table space is definitely a premium in this game. It's also definitely worth noting that the B-roll, the vivariums that you will see are still the prototype components. And from what I understand, I believe that all the player boards are going to look a little bit different. So they're going to have some unique artwork, which is going to be really nice. I also do want to mention that I do feel that sometimes the bonuses, the iconography could be a little clearer. So some of the bonuses are immediate bonuses. So you may get a popularity point, or you may get some immediate 2 education, for example, but it's not always clear which ones are immediate and which ones may trigger at a later time. There's some that you have that gain you conservation, but you need to wait for the like spring phase and the breeding phase where you roll a die, and if you get a 5 or more you get a conservation point. It's not necessarily clear, especially if you haven't played the game for a long time, that you don't roll the die immediately. So I do feel maybe they could have included like a little lightning bolt next to the immediate ones, just so everyone knows where they stand and doesn't need to think too much more of it. Also worth mentioning that for every completed row of your vivarium, you're going to be getting an extra popularity at the end of the game. So once again, it just helps to like push up those tracks and get those few extra points going. So now I just want to touch on the education tiles that come with the game. In the base game, you'll remember that you can build these in your zoo to score 2 education points for up to 2 species of 2 different terrain types, as long as they have an education value. Whereas in New Shores, these buildings have changed very slightly to feature just 2 wild terrain types. So the terrain types that you are associating with them are not predetermined, and they're actually determined when you place it into your zoo. So you can just place it but next to like a tropical species necessarily, so it's going to be a tropical education booth, but then you can build an enclosure next to it of a different terrain type later in the game, just to give you that extra flexibility. I think that is just such a great addition, especially when you're considering starting to mix and match different terrain types. If you've got 5 or 6 different terrain types in your game at one time, that's going to be so crucial to have that extra flexibility to ensure that you are able to score those points where, if and when you need to. And so I really like that addition, and I don't think I will ever really go back to using the old education booths. I'm not actually entirely sure if it's intended that these are meant to replace the ones in the base game, or whether when you're sort of expanding your horizons with the new species, or playing this with like the modular system, whether that's now to be integrated then. But quite honestly, I love the fact that they are not fixed. I think that just really helps the game flow better and really just it expands your scoring possibilities. I now want to just talk about the components of the game, and of course this is a pre-production copy that I have received, so I know that this is not going to be in its final stages, but already things are looking gorgeous. It is a beautiful looking game. Beautiful looking expansion. So the artists for this game have done an absolutely wonderful job at creating beautiful and striking artwork for all the animals. The components are really good quality so far, and the animal meeples, of course, are my absolute favourite part of the game. Just be aware that the screen printing that you will see on the B-roll, the screen printing specifically is in the deluxe edition of the game, so just bear that in mind. It is worth mentioning that at the moment I do feel that the colour differences between the male and female meeples for some certain species isn't particularly striking, but that may be something that they are addressing prior to going to full production. I haven't actually found that to be a problem in the base game when looking at the male and females in the final production of that copy, so I would anticipate that that is something that may be sort of tweaked along the way. It is worth mentioning here as well, just in case this is a query from anyone, it is not going to be possible to add all the components of this expansion into the base game box. What I have received, and I don't know if this is going to be the same as when we receive it at the end of the campaign, but it is an identically sized box pretty much to the base game. You're going to be getting a lot of new animals, a lot of new cards, a lot of new tuck boxes, much like the base game. It's all mostly eco-friendly as possible, which is brilliant. And so it's just not going to be possible to integrate this into one box. You are going to need room for two separate boxes here. So things that I haven't yet seen but I understand are going to be included in the campaign and some of the stretch goals. I understand there's going to be some extra artwork on some of the biome tiles. There's going to be extra artwork on the Vivarium boards, so player-specific artwork. And there may be some differences in the meeple printing designs. So there may be some like triple color meeples being printed, I believe, which is really exciting. I also understand that we are going to be getting even more species, even more main species as well, with the option of the modular market exchange to ensure that we can just mix and match from the base game, the expansion, and the additional species that we're going to be getting as well. I also understand that the deluxe edition of the game is going to be included with more species on top of that, which has been voted by the community on Discord throughout this design process, from what I understand. And this additional animal pack is going to be needing a copy of the expansion to be playable. So overall, there is just an absolutely huge amount of content here. There is so much going on, so many new animals to explore, and it's going to be really exciting. So I just want to wrap up the review now and just reiterate some of the main positives for Zoo Tycoon The New Shores expansion. I think the amount of extra content that you're receiving here overall just feels like a really highly replayable, immersive, and very polished experience. I'm actually very impressed by how well balanced everything's feeling now, especially when you consider all the different new species, all the different co-species that have also been designed as well, integrating this with the new education booths, the new terrain types, the Vivarium species. It's incredible how much playtesting must have gone into this, and it is feeling very seamless and very tied together. Going back to my original point in that I am not particularly expansion orientated, and I much prefer to sort of focus on the mechanics of the base game before I and beyond that, then I would want to switch to a different game. I think New Shores here does a fabulous job of actually just giving us more of the same. It's going to give us more of the same things that are already working really well in the base game. It does a really fantastic job of just minimizing that extra mechanical bloat that you can see in some expansions, and instead just boosts replayability, freshens up the gameplay a little bit, and just enhances the overall longevity of the Zoo Tycoon board game with minimal fuss. The addition of the Vivarium species and the Vivariums just helps to give players that extra push as well in terms of bonuses. Also adds a very small amount of additional puzzle to be mindful of throughout the game, and I just overall think that's a really lovely and fun experience. It just helps to also ease that difficulty in pushing up some of those tracks, and just helps to make everything seem a little bit friendlier, and I especially feel that in the solo game. So overall, Zoo Tycoon New Shores is definitely an expansion that I am really excited about. I am so glad to have got the opportunity to play, and I would highly recommend it. It is definitely worth noting, however, that this expansion may not be for you if you are somebody that is looking for a lot of extra mechanics to keep a game particularly fresh. If you are somebody that is bored with the base game mechanics overall and wants something more than just more of the same, this is not going to tick the box for you. Also as well, it is worth bearing in mind that the modularity and the modular system that comes with this game, if you are interested in that, that is going to definitely increase your setup time and add extra fiddliness. So it is worth just bearing that in mind before you go into this. But overall, I think that is you're able to integrate that as much or as little as you want. So I don't think it's too much to worry about. If you're somebody that's going into it with wanting to swap all of those species around, you already know that you're going to be setting up for a little while. So I'm going to wrap that up there. Thank you so much for listening to my review of Zoo Tycoon New Shores. Do definitely make sure that you check out the campaign. I will link that one down below in the description. So do have a look at that one there and do follow along if you are interested in the game. I do just want to say a big thank you to Mark and Samuel at Treecer Games for giving me the opportunity to play New Shores. I've had a fabulous time and I cannot wait to see this one in everyone's hands and to see everyone else enjoy it as much as I do. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the review and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.